family. Welcome to the Living For You YouTube channel. It's me, as you guys know, Dr. Larry. And as I promised you in the last video, I am here to come every day this week, kind of in a blitz, in a way of us talking about the current situation. There's no more time like the present for us to come together and to have these vital discussions. They are very, very, very much needed. And so I've committed myself, I've already made it up in my mind that I am going to come here and I'm going to be here consistently for a week, getting to have these discussions that we need, because it seems like the world around us is either changing, but there definitely is some chaos and some stuff. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'd like to say welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Go ahead and subscribe, because this is a good place. This is a safe place. This is a healthy place. This is a spiritual place. This is a wonderful place for you to be. So welcome, 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 welcome. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when I do drop content. Go ahead and follow me on social media. My information is here, so you can see on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm at Dr. Larry Smith. You can also find Living For You information all over the place. But for those of you who want to go specifically to the website, you can go to www.liveforyoucoaching.com, www.liveforyoucoaching.com. You see it here, obviously. So you can come out there, you can go out there. There are free resources. I'm working on more free resources because I like to give some things for free of quality content. Things that are going to give you a value for free. You don't have to pay for certain things. And then those of you who want coaching, one-on-one coaching with me, now we can coach via Zoom, we can coach via telephone, we can set up an hour session. There's information on how to do that there. So if in this time of turmoil and this tumultuous situation and you need a little extra help or a little extra things to get your mind back where it needs to be for an inexpensive price, hit me up. There's information on www.liveforyoucoaching.com on how to get that done. So welcome to my new people. Hit me up, leave messages. Let's work. To my faithful subscribers, I love you. You're family. I hate the term subscribers. I love the term family. So you guys are my family. I'm welcoming people into my family. So hit me up, leave messages, contribute to the discussion and to the dialogue so that we can expand this. And even if you might disagree with some of the things I say, I'd rather you also contribute to the dialogue, because this isn't a one monolithic, one-dimensional conversation. This is a conversation, and so it's a safe space. So we discuss and we listen and we learn and we grow, and that's why we're here. So leave comments, leave discussions and suggestions for videos, and I look at all of them. So welcome family, welcome new people, welcome everybody. Come on into the table. So if you're unaware, if you've been living under somebody's rock or somebody's cave in the last week or so, what prompted this blitz of videos from me was a situation that's been happening around us here in the United States. Unarmed black man was killed by the Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Department, and it was filmed as the guy was pleading for his life, saying he couldn't breathe, and people were pleading for his life as well. The guy's life was taken. And that image went to social media. Next thing you know, social media took it and it went all over on the news and on everywhere in the world, and it sparked protests and riots and looting in over 50 cities across the United States. But even more so, they have been rioting and protests across the world in places like Canada and Poland and Australia and Germany and in London and England and gosh, there's so many places, Syria and Brazil and Mexico, in response to this situation here in the United States, which is obviously, you guys know that the United States has a tremendous influence on the world, and the world watches us. When Barack Obama was elected president in 2008, the world celebrated because we thought then that that was a catalyst to ending the system of racism in this country. And unfortunately, it seems as though within recent years, there has been an uptick in racist rhetoric. There's been an uptick in racist sentiments, there's been an uptick in racist responses, and there's been an uptick in racist situations and incidents like George Floyd's death at the hands of this police officer. Rest in peace, George Floyd. And so obviously there is a need for this discussion to happen. And actually sometimes, as I said in yesterday's video, that there has to be this catalyst, maybe this time of tension and this difficult time, this stressful time, perhaps to get us to the next moment that's a better moment. That is my hope and prayer and desire and wish for this moment, and plea for this moment, that we use this fire, we use this where we are going in from being cold to come out being diamonds, if we allow it to pressurize us in the right direction. So anyway, so the video today is kind of an interesting story time video. I'm going to do a series of them, about 3 stories in this or so, and talk about my experience with racism. If you didn't know, I'm a black man. I'm an African American. I'm a man of African descent in the Americas. Although being born in South Louisiana and my family are Creole on both sides of the family, which would make me Creole African American, I still classify myself as a black man. And in the United States, obviously, color, what I look like physically, matters a lot more than what my actual ancestry might be. And as a black person in the United States, we know that, we feel it. We had here something called the 1-drop rule throughout the South. And in the 1-drop rule, what it said was, if you had just 1 drop of black in you, then you were black. And therefore the black laws and the black codes and the black life and society applied to you. And in fact, we had Supreme Court legislation that kind of, you know, in many ways condoned that. There was a guy named Homer Plessy in 1896. And Homer Plessy was, I think, 1%, less than 1% black. But somebody knew he was a percentage. There was a drop. Somebody knew that. And so because of that, Homer Plessy was told to go to the back of the train. Now, Homer Plessy lived his life generally as a white man. Let's be honest. And he knew of his ancestry, but he presented and projected and physically was white. And so he thought, I'll just get me a ticket in the white seats and sit in the front because it's better accommodations, and I'll do that, and I live my life this way we knew. And so he was told to go to the back. He refused, and there was an ensuing law case with it, behind it, that the lawyers got in on it and used this as one of the civil rights cases to test the civil rights cases of Louisiana and the Louisiana public accommodation laws of the 1870s. And so in 1896, this case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of segregation. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the color line. And in that idea of the color line, that blacks and whites can live separate lives, separate experiences, have separate accommodations and facilities and cemeteries and hospitals and water fountains and all of these other things, as long as they're equal. But the reality of it was that we know now that they weren't at all equal. And black people knew that back then. And of course, by 1954, Brown versus the Board of Topeka, Kansas Education Topeka, Kansas, that overturned this idea that we can live in 2 separate societies and that it's perfectly normal. Because all things were being discovered. They were doing tests and they were evaluating and psychologically examining children and finding out that this dual society had a psychological effect, a negative psychological effect on African Americans, and that the facilities and that our accommodations weren't at all equal, or even in many places up to par for your average human to have some type of enjoyment in it. So anyway, so with that said, in the United States, we have the 1-drop rule. That was a lot to say that. We have the 1-drop rule, and we did. And back in that 1-drop rule, what you would means is that if you had 1 drop of black, you were black, and that's just the way that this went. And so, with that said, I consider myself black despite all of the ancestral mixture. And in reality of it is, most of us are mixed in general. There is nobody who is of pure anything really on the planet, and hadn't really been for thousands of years, simply because humans have been moving and migrating and mixing and mingling and having sex and blending for many years. So there are really hardly, if any, people who are of any pure ancestry of anything on this planet anymore. Nevertheless, the purpose of this video is to be my stories and my experience with racism, because I think sometimes when we think about racism. And when we think about these things, we think about some distance past and black and white water fountains, and we think about slavery and Jim Crow and all of these things that are reminiscent of physical, actual things of racism that we can physically see. But today, racism hasn't been like that in a very long time. Yes, there are incidents sometimes, like you see with this particular police officer. Yes, there are incidents sometimes when you see like a cross or a noose left or a swastika or something that is a racist thing. Yes, we see those things sometimes, but that type of overt racism is rare in America today. So you don't really see that kind of racism on a grand scheme for most African Americans. The racism that we face today is more institutional, and it's affecting us more just by the average way of life. So like going for jobs and not getting jobs because we're black, or our names might sound too black, or getting pulled over by cops and harassed by cops because we're black, and the criminal justice system and the legal system of us getting arrested and serving more time for things like crack versus cocaine and all kinds of interesting little things, political disenfranchisement and redrawing and redistricting of maps and all kinds of other things that they have there. It's more of an institutionalized thing that's just common everyday practices that are built upon on a racist system that allows it to play out itself in a racist way that affects African American people in an adverse way. So, but I can honestly say for myself, as an African American male, I have experienced racism in varying forms in my life. From being called a nigger, which is the N-word, and that might get bleeped out. I should have bleeped it out, but you know, it's a derogatory term for black people. Getting called that by people who were not black. And they weren't always white people. These were sometimes people who were Hispanic, or people who were Asian, or people who were Middle Eastern who weren't black, saying those types of things to me because they knew of the historical pain that a word like that brings about. So being called the N-word, that's been one of my experiences. And the term the N-word is supposed to demean me. It's supposed to put me down. It was intended that way. It was a negative, derogatory term. It was intended to be that way. And so I don't use that word generally, as even with the A on it spelled differently. I don't use it because I know the history of it was to put me down. But being called, but I've learned to accommodate certain things within my community. So there are people around me, family members I have, friends that I have who use that word, so I'm able to just accept it from them. But to be called from it from an outsider of my community, who's not a black person, it's insulting. It's racism. And it didn't, like I say, it wasn't just white people, it was other people who weren't part of the black community. Other marginalized people, which made it even worse because that gave them something that they felt they were better than me because they know of the historical stuff behind that. So yeah, so I've had that. I've had situations in which I can be communicating with a white man, and in his natural disposition, he feels as though he is the authoritative figure over me. Even though I've gone to school for a very long time, I've earned a PhD, I've earned multiple degrees, 2 masters, few bachelor's degrees. I've done what I had to do. I've educated myself and got certifications and licenses and all of these things and these things behind my name and under my belt. And 9 times out of 10, when I walk in the room, I'm one of the most educated people in that room, nevertheless, because of the dynamic of race. Any white guy, whether he is as educated or he's not as educated, sometimes I've had the conversational experience of as though I am being dominated by, or I am being led, or I am not as much of an expert. I've had students as a teacher, white male students, who feel as though they have an authority over my classroom, who feel like they have more knowledge about my subject that I've been studying, history for many years, or religion for many years. And they'll say, I had one student tell me one time, I can just go to the internet and I can Google everything you know and I can come back and teach that class. And I challenged him on it. I said, well, why don't you do that? You have the next lecture. It's all yours. And he didn't show up, and then when he did show up, he kind of didn't say nothing about it and just disappeared. Because I let him know that what you're telling me is you're devaluing what I've gone through. You're devaluing what I've accomplished. And of course, you guys know that it's not all about accomplishments. I only mention my accomplishments when I have to defend the fact that I am a person who is of accomplishment and I am a person who have done things. And so I wanted to let him know that. But he thought he could challenge that. But I am highly doubtful that he delivered that same challenge to a non-black teacher. I highly doubt it. I believe that his level of respect was a little bit higher. Even because if he did be that disrespectful to the non-black teacher, chances are he's a disrespectful person to his parents. And I just, like I said, I just don't see that that would have been the case. But I've had students ask, could I censor white male students, because he said they've said that they feel as though they dominate the room, as though they have a right and an expert opinion on every subject that we talk about. And I've seen that, I've understood that, and I've made a place in my classrooms and an intention in my classrooms to say everybody has a voice here. We are not, it is not our right to give somebody else's story through our voice. If it's someone here who can represent that story that we're talking about, we're going to allow them to have their own voice to tell that story, no matter who it is. And so we're going to step back and we're going to learn their story from their mouths instead of try to dominate, which is just a product, I guess, of ancestry of colonialism and colonizing. This idea that I can come and I can conquer and I am the one and my way is the right way and you follow my way and I'm the leader. But colonialism has done more damage around the world than a lot of things. And so therefore the colonial mentality is not a mentality of getting to know people and getting to know yourself and growing. So I have to always sometimes, diffuse that. So that's racism. That's what we see as racism. I remember one time, at one of the schools I was working at, I teach African American history. And this school hadn't had an African American history at all in 78 years, which is strange enough in itself. Black people have been here since 1619, well before this school was even a thing. And black culture had been developed in this country well before the school was even a thing. And there were black people in the vicinity of the school and in the surrounding areas, and they had black students, but they had never had an African American history class at this college in 78 years of the school's history, which was surprising in itself, but not surprising in some ways, because some people see that as alternative history. Even though black history is my history, black history is American history. You can get the story of the Americas, get the story of the world and the Western world through African history, African American history. But anyway, and so I'm leaving my class after or at least I'm going in to teach the class. And as I go in to teach the class, there's another professor, a white guy, and his comment was kind of interesting. He said, "What class is taught in this classroom after I leave this classroom?" Oh, I said, African American history. He said, "Oh, wow, African American history." He said, I've been here for 25 years and I don't believe that's ever been taught at this school. I said, "No," I said, "This is the first time that this has been taught at this school in this school's history." He said, "Oh, wow, that is so fantastic." He said, "Let me ask you a question. What department is that in? Anthropology?" For those of you who don't get that, I'll put the definition of anthropology up there. Anthropology is studying of early humans and hominids and human forms, primates, early Neanderthal and Precambrian man, and a whole bunch of early hominids and human forms. It is not the study of history, right? And as I said, African American history. I said, no, it's history. It's in social sciences. It's in the history department. And I made that perfectly clear to him that this is a history. And I said African American history, so it should have been in his mind that it's a history, right, of America from an African American perspective. But it's almost as though he refused to acknowledge and accept and take part that this was part of the fabric of the greater story of American history. And how did I know that? Because every time I would see him, his one question to me was, "How is that African American Studies class?" Which was his way of devaluing and demeaning the level of history of what I was teaching to something like a study that is, because studies are generally, not on the same level of an established discipline like history, if you know anything about higher ed. So he was trying to devalue and demean what I was doing and what I was teaching. and why I was teaching it. Not overt racism to the core of where he's burning a lynch, burning a cross, having a noose, drawing a swastika, but it's subconscious racism. And this is here in California. So this is not like, in the South where people think, oh, you're going to experience racism in the South. No, most of the racism that I faced has been here. There have been subtle things throughout my life, but most of those types of situations have been here. And it's been around people who probably consider themselves liberal. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about racism doesn't care if you're a liberal. Racism doesn't care if you're conservative. Racism doesn't care if you don't care. Racism, at the end of the day, is the idea of racial superiority or some type of superiority because of your race over another. And so, yeah, so that was another one of my experiences of racism. And another one of my experiences of racism was one that just wasn't really deep on those levels, but it was in the sense of when you're around people who aren't black and the way they communicate with you. What I've noticed is that black and white people in this country do not communicate good. I don't know what word I want to say. We don't effectively communicate. It's almost as though we communicate at each other, especially from the white perspective, that I'm gonna communicate at you, but it almost feels like I have to try to make you comfortable when you're black to speak to you. So people come up to me, white guys, and say, "Oh, what's up, my man? What's up, dude? What's up, bro?" And then I go watch them say something to somebody else, and it's not the same level or intensity of coolness that they tried to have with me. Or you might say, for example, my name is Lawrence Smith, and of course I go by Dr. Larry because I'm not offended by Larry. Larry is easy, it's quick, it goes fast, it's easy to pronounce, it makes it nice, it's good. Larry is fine. Dr. Larry is who I am. But white people that I work with and have worked with, they've taken up the liberty upon themselves to shorten Lawrence, which is a fairly easy, fairly common, fairly standard name, to Larry. How you doing, Larry? Larry. And what I've noticed that there was a way of, I guess you would say, demonetization or minimizing my name for their comfort. In the same way they use terms like Native American, in the same way they use terms like African American, in the same way they say Hispanics or Latino, as a way of just comprising all of these different groups of people with different nationalities and different ethnicities in a safe category to make it convenient for them to say and to talk about. They do the same thing sometimes with my name. Larry. And the Y, so it's something about that Y, like baby or sweetie or dearie or whatever, that makes it a little bit softer and a little bit more palatable, right? And I'm like, why do I have to be palatable or comfortable for you? And we know historically that part of the racist situation is this idea that black people have to, that white people have to be comfortable with black people. That's the whole idea of Jim Crow and the minstrel show. That as long as black people are funny, as long as black people are buffoonish, as long as black people are comical and jovial and just lighthearted singing, la la la, sports figures, athletes, they're easy to get, entertainers, they're easy to get along with. I can appreciate all of that. Most popular form of entertainment from about 1835 to about 1965 is the minstrel show, because it made white audiences comfortable with black people without having to actually interact and engage and live around black people. And so demonetizing or minimizing or minusculing my name is a way of making comfort to them sometimes, I feel. Now, like I said, I don't know the motives, but that's what it feels like to me. And black people don't say, "Can I call you Larry? Can I change your name for my comfort?" They won't. My black friends and people I meet who are black just don't do that. Lawrence is easy enough for them. So I, like everybody, face racism. And I bet if you go to Oprah, to Michael Jordan, to LeBron James, to Puff Daddy, to anybody who is black, they have stories too. And I haven't given all my stories. I'm just giving 3. But they have stories too. And so that's part of the problem. That's one of the reasons why we protest what we're protesting. because we're sick of this racism, right? Many people don't even recognize it. I actually listened to an interview with Rush Limbaugh today, and it was almost like he didn't understand that some of the things he was saying and what his beliefs were that he was expressing were expressing racist, white supremacist beliefs. And it was so natural to him that he didn't even know. He was clueless as to what it was, but he didn't. And so because he was clueless as to what it was, he couldn't get our point as to how it makes us feel. And what happened is, historically in the United States, that has been the case. That it is this blanket, unintentional, undirectional, big and physical racism that impacts black people a lot deeper than any of that physical stuff could ever impact us and we could ever heal from, because it's pervasive. And so now people act it out without even having to think about it being an actual thing. So racism is real. I felt it. I've experienced it. We've all felt it. And so when we come here to the table, these are things we discuss. And we'll be here for an entire week discussing these things and having these conversations and wondering and questioning and answering and discussing. And so come back tomorrow. We're going to continue and have a different discussion about something different. But I wanted to share my experience with racism to show you that I'm not even immune. I can be centered. And I might not even always express my feelings about it, but it happens to me too, because I'm a black man. And so being a black man in America means you're inevitably going to face, at some point in your life, racism. And generally, you're going to face it throughout your entire life. Let's keep the discussion going. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave your messages. I want to know from you. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram and on Facebook at Dr. Larry Smith. If you need additional help to help you get more present, go to www.liveforyoucoaching.com so that we can set up an appointment and we can talk one-on-one, or we can probably do some group work here if it's really that important, because I know a lot of people are going to need coaching through this moment and after this moment. So I'm here for you. Let's work together. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next video.